Most accidents aren't new people that have no clue what they're doing. They're experienced people that got so complacent they forgot something critical. I'm a rock climber as well. And, there's sort of a saying when you're into the rope safety nerd stuff, like I am, complacency kills.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Smart Economy Podcast, where we ask your favorite builders the questions you wish you could ask yourself. This is a production of neonewstoday.com, and I'm your host, Dylan Grabowski. In this episode, we're joined by Josh McIntyre, the founder of Chain Toots, an education resource for blockchain security, and a chairperson at the CCE at C4, which is a consortium of educators and security experts that are seeking to establish a set of standards for cryptocurrency and blockchain. In this conversation, we discuss Josh's genesis into open source software, his book that he recently released about security practices, how to create an individual's security framework, the 3 key security elements in the blockchain space, 2025's predominant security threats, and so much more. Just a reminder, nothing said on this podcast is a solicitation to buy or sell any tokens, and that the guest or host might hold tokens discussed in any given episode. You can check out a disclaimer on www.neonewstoday.com. Also, if you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating and reviewing it on your favorite podcasting platform and sharing with your friends and family. Every rating, review, like, and comment really does help us reach more people and bring you more of your favorite guests. With all that said, I really enjoyed chatting with Josh, and I hope you enjoy the conversation too. Hey everyone, welcome to the Smart Economy Podcast. Today we're joined by Josh McIntyre. Among many hats he wears, one of the predominant is chairperson at the CCE Committee at C4, which is a consortium of educators and security experts that are looking to help establish a set of standards for cryptocurrency and blockchain. And before we get into the hellos, Josh, you're also joined by some fellow C4 alum on the pod, including Jessica, Michael, Josh, and Kent. So we're thrilled to have yet another person from the C4 umbrella onto the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really privileged to get to work with all those folks. So it's exciting to be part of the fold.
Yeah, totally cool. I got to hang out with Josh and Michael and Jessica at Consensus Toronto last month, and it was really cool to see everybody in person. Before we delve into everything, I just kind of want to hear why you're here. What's your genesis story with Bitcoin, or is it with Ethereum? Is it with decentralized open source software? What's kind of like your intro into the space?
Yeah, I think decentralized open source software is really the genesis for me. I was in college in the early days of Bitcoin around 2013, 2014. And as a computer science student in general, I'm very interested in sort of open technologies, open software, open knowledge sharing. So having a decentralized protocol for money coming out and coming on the scene was very interesting to me, sort of bringing together open source, cryptography, software engineering in all these interesting ways. So I dived into it, was encouraged to learn by some professors, and then started a couple years later putting out my own educational content and really trying to build out that sense of community.
That's interesting that you said your professors encouraged you to delve into this, probably because you were looking at it from more of a technology perspective and not necessarily a money perspective. But that was 12 years ago now. And what were your professors thinking at the time? Were they just kind of egging you on because, yeah, let's let the college student explore cutting edge whatever? Or did they also see the value prop of decentralized monies?
Yeah, the Dr. Anthony Sarapilia at SVC in Pennsylvania. So he was exploring how open blockchains could help with computer science education, looking at it from the same perspective as me, all these interesting ways that those technologies interact. So I actually got to help him do a little bit of research for a paper that he wrote on that topic. And he and I have had a lot of very fun conversations over the years about how the technology's evolved.
Awesome. So like your aha moment was basically the second you started looking at Bitcoin's code?
Yeah, kind of. I don't even know if I'd look specifically at the code, but just starting to learn like, wow, how hash functions and elliptic curves and all of these different components, along with sort of the economic side, interacted to create a way to exchange value without having to have anybody in the middle. To me, in general, right, I use lots of proprietary software. I use lots of open source software. The thing to me about technology that's really cool is we can have these choices, and we don't necessarily have to have a ton of infrastructure for anybody to be able to write code and create an alternative to something that's been sold by $1 billion company. Computer science is very upstart in that way.
So Franklin Templeton is putting portions of their ETF proceeds into supporting Bitcoin developers. And we're starting to see these kind of like traditional financial entities support OSS. Using other examples, maybe like Linux or some other architecture that I'm unfamiliar with, how does open source software stand the test of time and be able to survive or live alongside these proprietary softwares, or maybe even perform or function in better ways?
The thing that I sort of love about open source is the motives are a little bit different than proprietary software, right? There is tons of amazing proprietary software out there that does a great job. But at the end of the day, that software is developed and maintained for the purpose of making money for a company. Whereas a lot of the open source software world is very community oriented, right? I love to see open source developers get paid for their work and be able to make a living with it. But I mean, half of the internet is propped up basically by passion projects written by, one guy and maintained. And they're not two separate worlds, right? Big companies use open source software to help build their software and many times will give back. What makes it so different to me is sort of the community building effort and people's desire to just share knowledge, share software for the purpose of creating something interesting and trying to solve a problem for people.
Yeah. Do you think adding like this economic layer into code, into like the tech stack, like we have with Ethereum, Bitcoin, all these other cryptocurrencies, do you think that adding this like economic element revolutionized open source software and perhaps has created a path to provide like a sustainable way for OSS developers to build a life that they can do this full time and enjoy building what they want to build?
I mean, absolutely, I think it helps. What can be very interesting about crypto software in particular is there's sort of a more built-in path to creating something open source, but also being able to make a living or make some amount of an income off of it. That's really beneficial for open source developers. There sometimes can be a downside with that too, from the security perspective and the social engineering perspective, because bad actors are also incentivized to create software that could potentially be a scam, do something malicious, and they can make money off of that too. So there's sort of a delicate balance there, I think, that we've seen evolve in the ecosystem. But largely on the positive side, this is empowering people to better their lives, better software development, and also be able to make a living off of it.
Cool. I want to delve into a lot of what you just brought up in a moment, but I'm from an era in the crypto and blockchain scene where if anything mentioned with Microsoft or Google or any of these big names was associated with a blockchain project, it would send the value of the token sky high. So I don't know, maybe it's just from a bygone era that when I see someone working at like a large enterprise, I get a little tickle in my brain. So you do a lot of the open source software and content creation and security stuff as volunteer or as a side hustle. Your main day gig, your 9 to 5, is working at Microsoft. So maybe just like really quickly, you could just share what your role is there. And then I would love to get like a temperature reading for how your peers view the space in which we're talking about today.
Definitely. Yeah, so my day job is, other than lots of computer science learning, is totally unrelated to crypto. I'm a software engineer at Microsoft here in Pittsburgh. I work on a file system product for Azure Cloud. And it's really cool because One of the great things about computer science is even if you're working on something completely unrelated to what you're really interested in, you're totally learning skills that apply elsewhere. I've touched a very broad swath of CS in my 10, 12, 15-year career, and it all ties together. In terms of temperature reading, it's honestly a mixed bag because crypto does get kind of a bad rap because of the scams, because of the pump and dumps, because of some of the negative sides that have evolved from the technology. And there are a lot of people in the CS field that feel like it's not the best use of technology. It could be kind of a waste of energy or, problematic for those reasons. But there's equally as many people that find it really fascinating. They love that intersection of open source, finance, software development, cryptography, security, just because it's so fascinating. And it really can help empower people to have a choice in how they interact with their money.
Yeah. Do you have any peers at like the water cooler that you talk with about either building on decentralized solutions or even just cryptocurrency in general? Or is it kind of a thing that people don't really bring up at the office?
It totally depends. I honestly have a lot of support in my peer group. I feel like people like my enthusiasm, which I think is really fun. I put out a book this year about security that's also open source, and folks have been asking a lot about how that's going and supporting that. I've definitely had some water cooler conversations about sort of the applications of blockchains, even for things like voting. Just depends on the day. We all have our own sets of interests and helping people with tech.
Something that I've been curious about for a long time, when you look at like these decentralized storage projects like Storj or IPFS or insert the name here, they're always bragging about the merits of decentralized file storage networks. Since you're working on Azure or on a product within the Azure umbrella, where are we at in terms of like the growth of distributed file storage networks into being competitive with a more centralized entity, or maybe even something that is like under the umbrella of Microsoft that has a lot of different clients using Azure? Are we getting closer? Whenever I see like the good merits of these distributed file storage networks, is it really just them kind of trying to sell themselves?
I haven't looked at them a ton, but in general, what I would say is this. This is such a cop out tech person answer, right? But there's pros and cons to both. I think realistically, something like a decentralized file system, like an IPFS, is trying to solve a bit of a different problem than an Azure Blob is. These distributed mechanisms are more so designed for their openness and for their censorship resistance. So, for sharing, for example, information for dissidents or security or privacy reasons, where by nature, that kind of system is going to be fairly inefficient and maybe a little slow for something like enterprise use, right? If you're trying to store a large amount of data for enterprise and dealing with all of the security and privacy concerns, sharing those files openly on the blockchain probably isn't the solution for you. But if you're trying to share critical security information in a socially difficult time, an Azure Blob account that could maybe be shut down probably isn't the solution either.
So yes and no.
Yeah. Yes and no. Yeah.
Awesome. So you mentioned a moment ago that you released a book this year on security. Is this under the Chain Toots umbrella? Maybe like let's just also jump into what Chain Toots is. What is it? How'd you get started? How long have you been educating people under the name Chain Toots?
Yeah. So I've been writing for slightly longer than this, but Chain Toots is about 6.5 years old. And I like to lovingly call it my giant ADHD brain dump of interesting computer science and security information. Basically, it's just my side project where I create open YouTube videos, articles, code demos, and now the book to help educate people on these topics. So there's not necessarily like a lesson plan or a set plan for the project. It's just kind of me having the opportunity to dive into interesting technology topics that I have some expertise on and share them with people, hopefully in a digestible way. I'm very passionate about it. It's a great way to stay engaged when work is being work because, it's the 9 to 5's not always fun. and everything is open source, open license. So it's freely available for people and they can reuse it, share it as much as they want.
So did the work that you're doing in Chain Toots kind of help get you connected with the C4 folks? How did that relationship get established?
It did. So many years ago in the before times, the before COVID times, C4 had a conference in Denver that had an open call for proposals for people to come in and educate. And Chain Toots was less than a year old at the time. And I reached out to them, applied to give a talk, and it was just an amazing time. And that really fostered a connection with Jess and all of the folks that are still involved with C4. And Jess reached out to me about starting the CCE committee about 2 or 3 years ago now. And of course, I was honored to be involved. So I just really like the C4 crew because they have a very similar ethos to me. We're just trying to educate people, have fun with it, make information accessible. So it's volunteer basis and it ties in really well with the kind of work that I'm doing on my own.
And so can you just kind of give a brief Eli 5 of what the CCE committee is and does?
Yeah. So, briefly, the C4 organization has some professional certifications and sort of knowledge paths for the certified Bitcoin professional, certified Ethereum professional, and the CCSA cryptocurrency standard auditor and the CCSS standard, which is all about different levels of security, knowledge about the technology from a professional context. And the C4 crew found a need to do something that was a little bit more entry level, sort of a before you get to the CBP and the CEP. And that's the purpose of CCE, is to give folks that are just starting out that want a broad swath of security knowledge and technology knowledge that might not be specific to Bitcoin or Ethereum.
I remember when we had Jess on, she was going through, I think, the first or second revision of the Ethereum certification and was talking about how difficult it is because Ethereum is constantly changing. So, do you have a lending hand or supporting role in helping to peer review these certification tests before they're sent out into the wild for professionals to complete?
I have not been specifically involved with the certifications because they sort of have their own committees. But what I have been involved with has been a lot of live streams similar to what we're doing now and articles and educational materials that we're building out for CCE. We don't really have a curriculum or a course yet for CCE. It's more of a broad introduction to some of these topics.
Do you ever go out on behalf of CCE and evangelize? Like, are you ever at Consensus or Denver or local blockchain meetups, going out there and trying to like capture people to come take the CCE exam?
I'm usually not the person doing that. Jess does such a phenomenal job of that, and some of the other folks that travel and go to the conferences. I do quite a bit of meetups and talks through Chain Toots. I just gave a talk about Python and security and blockchain at a local place called Hackers Guild here in Pittsburgh. So, very similar approach.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm kind of curious then, who are you trying to educate? Are you trying to educate like software developers? Because the talk you just gave is very oriented towards developers and engineers. Are you also trying to educate like my dad who might be interested? Or are you focusing more on someone who's probably already taken the first step into buying their first crypto or building on their first blockchain? Like, are you trying to capture everybody or are you trying to capture people who are already here and are looking for help?
So, for the CCE committee, we're largely looking at a more entry level audience or an audience that is blockchain familiar. Maybe they have a wallet, but don't know how to start diving deeper into security and key management and those topics. With Chain Toots, I actually have a pretty broad spectrum. So many of my videos are oriented towards entry level users and keeping them safe, educating them about scams and common pitfalls. But I also do quite a bit of videos that are much more technical, diving into code and cryptography demos, malware attacks. I like to touch a little bit of everything because I think it's all so interesting. And I think there is an audience for all of those different topics. Perhaps my channel could stand to be a little more focused, but it probably wouldn't be as fun then.
Yeah, I think that it being fun for you kind of leads into this next question I have, but I myself have felt over the years moments of burnout or moments of just being over it. And we've also seen in the last couple years, frankly, like a lot of quiet quitting from OGs who have been working in the space for a while. So, like, what keeps you going? What keeps you motivated?
I think that's a really interesting topic because I've talked a lot about this with friends who are in and out of the space. To be honest, I've experienced it in the sense that there are many downsides to crypto and how the industry has evolved, right? I think personally it's an amazing technology, it's empowering, but there is a lot of scams, there's a lot of dangers, there's a lot of negative things that happen in the space that, sometimes I say, I'm so excited to be in crypto. I'm so proud of the work that I do. And sometimes I say, I'm in crypto. That's so embarrassing, right? I think we've all been there. To me, the thing that keeps me involved, I think, is just being honest about the reason that I'm in it in the first place. I'm really interested in the technology. I still think it's incredibly fascinating. I still think using it in the right way can be really helpful for individuals and communities. And, since I've tried to avoid the negative side as much as possible and just stay true to what interests me, I don't really have to worry about any of that noise because I'm just being myself, I think.
Yeah. The thing that drags me down after working full time in the space since 2018 is I got interested into the blockchain crypto space in 2017 during the ICO era. And we were promised so much back then. We were told that there would be so many decentralized applications, the world would be coming on chain. And here we are 7 years later. There's no decentralized Uber. Coming on chain is like BlackRock buying Bitcoin and hosting its own money market funds. So it kind of sometimes feels like we were a little bit lied to, or maybe we were just buying into the visions of sugar plums and fairies. But that's what has been my biggest struggle, I would say, with continuing to be here day in and day out.
I totally feel you. Yeah, I mean, obviously I love it and I'm still here after 10 years, but it's an interesting space to be in, right?
I guess another thing then specific to the work that you do is you're constantly onboarding newbies, I would say. So do you ever feel like you're just constantly spinning your wheels, educating new entrants? Like, does it ever feel like Groundhog Day for you?
Believe it or not really. Even though a lot of the topics are the same, every person that gets to learn something new is fun for me. I'm just one of those people that's generally pretty bubbly, and I really like to teach people new things that I'm interested in. Like, my wife never hears the end of it, right? When I have an interest. And, it's kind of like I'm a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu guy, right? Every new person that comes in the gym warms me up to go through their first day with them and help them out, even though it's like I'm showing somebody the same thing for the 100th time. And it feels like the same in crypto, right? Because even though I might be saying, here's why you should never store your seed phrase unencrypted somewhere for the 1,000th time, it's that person's first exposure to something that could save them from a big problem. And that sort of community building interaction to me is always going to be engaging because you're connecting with somebody on a level that's helpful to them, even if it's not new to you.
Yeah, totally. So I'm very well aware that this is an open ended question, but from your perspective, what is security? Is it just maintaining seed phrases? Is it general OPSEC? Does it go as far as ensuring you use like an onion router and Tor network when you're surfing the internet? Like, how encompassing is security for you when you're talking with folks, both OGs and newbies?
Yeah, this is another, I think, great question to ask. One of the things that's interesting about crypto is many of us do get into it from maybe the side of a little deeper interest in privacy or security than the average person. So, not to use this in a degrading way, right? But there tends to be a lot of paranoia in the crypto space, which, I mean, it's kind of cool and interesting to think about. But what security really means to me is evaluating your personal threat model. what realistically is going to be a threat to you for your needs, your experience, and your lifestyle, and how to build a security plan around that. I often say when I'm doing this kind of work, right? We can talk anytime about the most secure way to do something, to store your seed phrase, to manage your whole self-custody ecosystem in your online life. But the most in-depth solution is not always actually right for every person. A solution that's so complicated that you're going to lose your keys or you're never going to be able to remember it, or you're going to get tired of it every time you need to send a transaction isn't actually necessarily the most secure solution, because you're going to find the gaps and make a mistake or get tired of it and throw it out entirely. So I want people to think about security for what it practically means for them.
Hmm. So when we look at security, like through the lens of Pareto principle, where can somebody put 20% of their efforts and yield 80% of the results? What are the most common ways in which we can improve, enhance, and ensure our security? What practices can we do that can minimize us from the majority of attacks or being susceptible to malicious actors?
Yeah, it's a broad question. I would say on a high level, divide it into three things when we talk about crypto. The first that applies to any type of wallet you use is social engineering awareness. The biggest threats to crypto users, in my experience, are social engineering attacks. It's scammers trying to directly trick you out of keys or to send them an irreversible crypto transaction for some reason, or install malicious software, all with the end result through different avenues to get money from you in a way that you can't claw back, the way that you can with a bad bank transaction, right? Or a credit card fraud. So that's a big one, right? You have to be aware and educated about social engineering tactics, and even not just specific scams themselves. You want to think about how these kind of things evolve. From a self-custody perspective, to me at a high level, that means understanding what your keys are and how to safely store them so that they are accessible to you, backed up, and not accessible to attackers. That's a very deep topic to get into that we could touch on some more, but that's kind of the high level. And then when it comes to custody solutions like exchanges, it's really about honing your traditional account management hygiene. So your passwords, your two-factor, your backup and recovery options, and hopefully now diving more into the passwordless future and getting away from some of those traditional vulnerabilities. This even includes things that people miss, like making sure your email account is as secure as your exchange account, so that somebody that knows your email can't get into that and do password resets and things like that. So that's kind of my high level, is how we think about those threats depending on how you're custodying your keys, and then being aware of social engineering that's going to target you no matter how you store your money.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I've actually been a victim of a social engineering attack where somebody convinced me they were my friend. And it was incredible how well they did. And I was years into the space by this time, someone who should have known better, but I didn't. I didn't even think to myself that this might not be the person who they're impersonating. And they ended up getting some Bitcoin out of me. So the heuristic that I kind of developed after going through my postmortem of my own attack was urgency. This individual was saying, you need to send me Bitcoin right now because I'm doing X, Y, and Z, and this is why I need it right now. And now, whenever anybody is trying to get me to do something urgent, and it's gotten to the point where you mentioned earlier where a lot of us are paranoid, but I always think of the Kurt Cobain lyric, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. Even if like my mom is like, you need to do this now, if it's on a text message, I'll go and verify that it's her number that's messaging me. So what are some other heuristics that listeners can apply to social engineering attacks beyond just urgency? If somebody's telling you out of the blue that you need to do something now, maybe take a step back from the computer and realize what's going on. What are some other ways that we can realize we're being socially engineered for some sort of attack?
Well, first, I want to say I'm very sorry you went through that. That's tough. And I think the fact that you went through and did a postmortem of that is exactly the right thing to do. And I love that you identified urgency. This is not like an official industry thing, but when I've been thinking about social engineering tactics to educate people through my content, right, I sort of think of three things. And the first one is, in fact, urgency. Generally, if somebody, whether you think you know them or you don't know them, that's trying to get you to do something fast should be a red flag or a heuristic to be aware of. The other two that I commonly identify when I'm looking at scams is threats. So they're threatening you with some negative action. Sort of strangely enough, one of my emails was involved in a crypto related data breach, and I get lots of phishing emails. And I sort of collect them and look at what their tactics are for my audience. And one of the very common themes is threats, right? You get the phishing email that says you must enter your seed phrase to update and verify your wallet, or our KYC policies are going to shut down your MetaMask account in 24 hours. Now, if you know the technology well, you know that's an empty threat, but not everyone does. And so that threat of a negative action gets people to give up their seed phrase along with kind of urgency tied in there. And then the other heuristic I often see is rewards. We love free money. We love easy money. Who doesn't? All of these too good to be true giveaways, investment scams, some of which are very sophisticated, like the sort of pig butchering scams. I hate that name, but befriending you, romancing you, ultimately getting you to invest in a fake platform that says you're going to make 50% a day. So the urgency, the threats, and the rewards get a lot of people. And they don't have to get everybody. They can send out these mass emails, send out these mass spam messages on social platforms, and get enough victims that make that a viable way for them to make a living, which is very unfortunate.
Yeah. One of the ways in which I've seen this kind of like mass deployment tactic at its finest is if you go onto any crypto YouTube video, there will be a malicious actor saying, "Here's my seed phrase. I'm locked out. Can you help me get there?" And what people will do is they'll input the seed phrase and they'll send gas to it, or they'll send tokens to it. And the wallet has a script that just sends those gas fees to the malicious actor. And so these are like dollars at a time that they're getting. But I mean, it's a massive net and they're probably catching a lot of people. Do you have any like insights into that?
We're very like-minded because actually my latest YouTube video that I put out is on this exact topic because I'm getting flooded with them now in my comments. I basically, since probably the first year of having my YouTube channel, have held and moderated my comments because there's just so many automatic bot scam comments, especially because I've done videos in the past on topics like recovery scams. There are already people that are looking for help with recovery, which most often isn't possible. And then you have these spam comments coming in like, oh, contact this fake hacker on Instagram. And, now I'm getting flooded with the seed phrase gas fee scams because, there's always going to be somebody, like, I hate to use this negative term, but there's always going to be somebody greedy enough to be like, sweet, I can get, $2,000 of free USDC by cleaning out this poor person that doesn't know not to share a seed phrase. And it's actually like scammers scamming scammers.
It's like Robin Hood stealing from the rich and, well, some sort of perverse, malicious Robin Hood. Cool. All right. So I really appreciate the kind of breakdown into social engineering awareness, urgency, threats, and rewards. What are some of like the best tactics that somebody can deploy for self-custody? It's very obvious to you and me. We've been in the space for a long time. Like you protect your seed phrase at all costs. But like, what does that mean? I had a moment about 5 years back where I was speaking with someone from Russia. And I was basically just talking about how it's scary to store your seed phrase on a piece of paper in your house because your house might burn down. And he's like, why would your house burn down? Is it not made out of concrete? And so American homes are mostly made out of wood. And so like a seed phrase stored on a piece of paper is a large concern. So maybe put it onto like a metal plate that is weather resistant or fire resistant. Anyways, what are some other top level key self custody preservation practices that you might be able to share with us that both an OG or somebody new might be able to benefit from?
Yeah, well, you already touched on the first one, which is backups. Backups are critically important because, as we know, but maybe somebody that's brand new to the space doesn't know, losing your seed phrase is not like losing your password to your Facebook account. Your seed phrase encodes all of the key data necessary to restore your wallet in the event that the original is lost. So maybe you have a mobile phone wallet and you drop it in the bathtub. Who isn't guilty of some accident like that happening? My dad put a cell phone through a snowblower at work once. Like, stuff happens, right? You need to have a backup. And when you talk about backups, you want to think about durability. So, is a paper seed phrase at least stored in, say, like a fire resistant safe in your home or a firebox? Do you have an off-site copy? Ironically enough, a bank safety deposit box could be your friend in this case, unless you're really paranoid about a seizure situation. Making sure that your backups are tested, accessible, durable against the elements, accidents, and also, unfortunately, as human beings, the event of our passing, making sure that your assets are transferable to any heirs or family or friends that you have in your life.
I also have another kind of like shame story of my years where I've screwed things up. My very first ledger, I wrote down my seed phrase incorrectly. And luckily, I didn't like lose access to that. But when I got another ledger again and I input my seed phrase, which at the time was holding all my digital assets, I had not stored it right. So I would have lost everything I'd accumulated over the first few years because more naive, younger, somebody who was focusing less on the details set me up for a bad situation. So that's like another lesson learned, a negative lesson learned that I was luckily able to avoid is make sure you write your seed phrases down correctly. So how do you ingrain that into people? What's the best way that we can make sure we wrote our seed phrase down properly for the long term?
Yeah, the first thing, of course, to consider is word order is important. So make sure that when you write down your words, you are noting somehow what the order is. It can conceivably be difficult or impossible to try to brute force reordering words if you have them out of order. There are some safeguards built into the BIP 39 standard, which I think is extremely interesting. You actually only need the first four characters of a seed word to uniquely identify the word out of the dictionary. So there is some safeguard in the event of mild damage to the seed. Like, maybe a little bit of water gets onto one word, you could conceivably figure out the word. I'm hoping to maybe dive more into, missing seed words and some of the things that you can do in certain scenarios. But I mean, generally, you should try to protect completely against any key loss, any loss of the data involved in that seed phrase, because the more data that's missing, the more rapidly it becomes impossible to reconstruct the data. So paper that you laminate, make sure it's stored in a fire and flood resistant place. Metal is better. There's tons of solutions on the market now, commercial products for engraving or storing a seed phrase in a very durable medium. And then just making sure that you think about all the places you have it backed up and having those multiple copies. So if one does get damaged, you're not losing your only copy of the data. That sort of goes for any digital data that's important to you. Generally, at least 3 copies, 2 different mediums, 1 offsite.
For anyone listening to this, Jameson Lopp has a fantastic overview of basically all the metal wallet protectors out there on the market. And he's actually gone through trying to destroy them all himself by freezing them, by torching them, by dropping acid on them. So if you're curious for a metal wallet or a metal seed phrase protector, just Google Jameson Lopp metal seed phrase protector and you'll see an overview for pretty much every solution that's out there on the market. I can't shill that enough. I found my solution by digging through his research. And then lastly, I think a lot of people like to be self-custodial maxis, not your keys, not your coins. But the reality is that a large portion of the world uses custodial solutions like exchanges. And you mentioned that just making sure that your access to these exchanges is intact. What are the top tricks and tips for making sure that I have securely made it so that my email address can't get easily hacked into? And maybe a top trick for ensuring I can always access my custodial exchanges.
Yeah, so I have a couple tips there. And real quick, I just wanted to briefly touch on too. Yeah, I think Jameson has a lot of great resources. He's even levels above where I'm at knowledge wise and security, and I'm not bad at it. He's been through a lot. And one thing I wanted to touch on briefly too, when we talk about security mindset, self custody, custodial threat model, relates to someone like Jameson, which is it is also very important to think about what your realistic threat model is. There have been instances of actual physical attacks against high profile people in the crypto space. Jameson is one of those individuals that has had credible threats against his safety by people hoping to access his Bitcoin because of his profile. You should be aware of those things, but I also think realistically, most of us, even most of us that have visibly been in the space for a long time, aren't that likely to face, right? I could be wrong, but like anybody that tried to rob me of crypto would be super disappointed and basically waste their life for no reason, right? Most people, that's not a threat. Whereas like somebody like Andreas, somebody like Jameson, people that have been in the space for a long time and are sort of known to have a high digital asset net worth, their planning is very different than planning for the average person like myself or you or somebody that's just getting into it and, doesn't go on Twitter and say like, I made $1 million in Bitcoin this week. Please don't do that. So, when we think about the custody solutions, it really is this kind of traditional account hygiene. Switch to passwordless if you haven't already. Any good exchange is going to allow you to use a pass key now instead of a password and traditional 2FA. If you're not doing that, make sure you have a long, strong, and unique passphrase for each service that you use. Password managers are your friend. There's some security details to think about with those too. But in general, the risk of storing credentials in a password manager protected by a very strong passphrase are less than reusing the same bad password everywhere. Use your strong 2FA, especially in crypto. So always use the Authenticator app based or a hardware security key over text message or email 2FA. I know we're getting into a kind of a long answer here, but SIM swap attacks are very prevalent in this space. This is attackers impersonating you at the phone company's support desk and getting access to your phone number. And they can use that to get the codes and take over your account. So always avoid that if you can, because that's a pretty easy avenue for a good attacker to take over your account without having to know your password. All of these are pretty traditional account management things, but a lot of details to think about.
For a lot of folks who maybe have their own hardware wallet, maybe a physical key like a YubiKey is something that they might become interested in. What are your top tips for that? I personally love the idea of a hardware device, but I'm always scared to put 100% of all my security onto there because what happens if I lose it or what have you? What's like the best sort of hygiene you can have with like a physical passkey device?
So the easy answer for something like that is pretty much any good service that allows you to use a hardware key will allow you to associate multiple keys with that service as a backup. So if you're going to use a YubiKey, which I highly recommend, I think they're fantastic and I use them as well, you should have multiple YubiKeys and register them all to the service at the same time. And then kind of spread them out the way you would spread out your other backups. So if you're going to have a YubiKey that's on you all the time in a backpack or in your laptop that you might lose, make sure your backup YubiKey is stored somewhere like your safe, a known location in your house, and ready to go should you need to use it as the backup. And then, of course, if you are in a data loss scenario where you lose a key or a seed, as soon as you recover, make another backup, right? get that other YubiKey shipped to you, make that the backup now and put it in the same place. Always have a fail safe for these types of things, especially in the crypto world if you're self-custody, because there's no one there to help you if you make a mistake.
I think basically like the past 20 minutes we just went through are some great kind of like intro levels into how a newbie can hit the ground running, and really, if they hone in onto what we just spoke about, really position themselves to be pretty secure in this space. Obviously, like ongoing education is a must because everything is always changing in blockchain and crypto at a more rapid rate than a lot of other things. So I think for like the new person, there's a lot that they can just glean from everything we just talked about. But I think a lot of us, after we figure this out for ourselves, we can go years, if not decades, without re-educating ourselves or continuing our education. So what about for like the experienced, the OG crypto blockchain user? Where are they blind in their assumptions? Where are they maybe not staying so sharp, and they're setting themselves up for a breach in their security standards? Are there any kind of like rhyming sort of events that you've seen in your conversations with people where OGs lost a step, and maybe the most of us should double check this to make sure we're still in tune? Like, what can we do as an OG to make sure we're still in our game?
That is a big risk for being actually a sophisticated person in the space. I'm a rock climber as well, like recreationally. And, there's sort of a saying when you're into the rope safety nerd stuff, like I am, complacency kills, right? Most accidents aren't new people that have no clue what they're doing. They're experienced people that got so complacent they forgot something critical. So when I think of two high level things to think about is number one, is don't get complacent in your education and your continuing practicing of these skills. So you've done your initial threat model 2 years ago. You bought the hardware wallet. You educated yourself on scams in 2023, what the most common tactics are. Security is not necessarily a set it and forget it type of enterprise. If it's been 2 years since your last honest assessment of how much do I have stored, is it appropriately protected for that value? How are my backups? Just think about it again. I mean, even put it on your calendar, right? Schedule 30 minutes out of the year around a vacation time to reevaluate where you're at. Have you kept up with the latest tactics? Have you made sure that your backups are available and those sorts of things? Which leads me into kind of the second point, which is we often say in computing, a backup isn't a backup unless it's tested. If the last time you touched your seed phrase is 5 years ago, just double check. Is it still where I think it is? Is it importable into another device? Maybe if you have a backup hardware wallet, or if it's a hot wallet, can I import it into another hot wallet? Making sure that things are still as accessible as you think they are. I think something that gets missed, especially amongst experienced folks, is we're so focused on the external threats that we forget that in crypto, in a self-custody scenario, we are also a threat to our own assets. If we make a mistake or if we forget, there's no support line to help us. So continuing awareness of what your own setup, what your own situation is, can save you from the equal heartbreak of having your assets stolen. And, it's arguably probably feels worse, right? If you just forgot and you can't access your keys, that sucks. I would just say as well, this is kind of the 2 points that I wanted to hit on, is the ongoing education, the ongoing practice of hygiene, right? You don't just take a bath once, you take one every day or every other day. So the other threat that comes with being an experienced person is don't make the mistake of thinking that you are not vulnerable to these attacks. It's such a simple thing to say, but I can't stress enough how many people I see in the crypto space that are experienced and, for lack of a better way to put it, are a little bit too cocky thinking that it can't happen to them. I know some very sophisticated people, even from C4, that are information security professionals at a very high level in the industry that have gotten phished, right? And have talked about their experiences. Phishing is not just about lack of experience or about lack of knowledge. It's about preying on normal human tendencies, the urgency, the threats, the rewards, right? I want to think I'm less vulnerable to phishing than probably the average person. And I would say that I likely am, but I am not invulnerable. So be aware and keep yourself on your toes at all times, because that complacency will get you.
I think the three heuristics that you spoke about earlier, like pay attention to urgency, threats, or rewards. If you kind of go through those three steps whenever you're being asked to do anything, if you think about it and say it out loud like a mantra, it can really help with phishing attacks. But they're getting really sophisticated, these bad actors and these malicious actors. In the years that we've seen the space mature, we've probably also seen social engineering attacks, malicious actors mature as well. What today in early July 2025, what's kind of like the predominant security threat actor out there? What's like the number one scheme or scam, if you want to put it that way, that we're seeing today?
I don't know if I could put it on, like, say, a specific known threat actor, because I don't necessarily keep abreast of that at that level. But in terms of what I see on a day-to-day basis through my content and users, the two biggest ones are definitely the investment style scams, especially not in a political way, but it seems like we're kind of in a precarious time economically. The job market's rough. People are looking for ways to keep themselves afloat or make some extra cash. The luring in of a passive income crypto investment that's high yield is very attractive to people from all backgrounds. I've talked to people that are IT professionals like myself that have gotten taken by giveaway scams. These things happen. And then the other thing is maybe more on the technical front, the types of phishing attacks that try to get people to reveal their seed phrase or maybe install malicious software on their PC or their phone that can swipe keys, swap out addresses. It's really those two fronts that I'm seeing the most out in the wild, all of which are trying to get people to either get a reward or deal with a threat or just have some kind of urgent message that results in them giving up the keys.
So, I guess as we're kind of like wrapping up and zooming out, we're keeping ourselves safe, but maybe we can end on a high note. I was mentioning earlier that it feels like grinding after a decade of grinding, but we're still here. There's something here that keeps us here. So, as we take a all-encompassing look at what this asset class, this technology stack, this vertical offers, what are you looking forward to in the next 1 to 5 years? What has you really excited about just like what blockchain offers in general?
I think this is a great question and actually tie in for something that I wanted to say earlier and kind of maybe blanked out a little bit. When we talk about maybe getting a little bit jaded on the space with how some negative things are, the thing that keeps me grounded and exciting is like total typical software engineer stuff, which is it's hard for me to get wrapped up in all of the promises. I'm like, it's just code. It's just software that does something useful and interesting. And I think it should be looked at that way, right? I think there is a lot of hype and promises in crypto, some of which is warranted, some of which maybe isn't. But at the end of the day, what excites me is that this is a long running, battle tested open protocol for money. No matter what happens with investment, with regulation, with how the technology evolves, different smart contracts, different coins, different blockchains, at the end of the day, there is a technology for your use case. Whether it's building a smart contract for something important to you, whether it's being able to send money to somebody across the world to get paid for consulting, to share something with your family, to help a small business deal with transaction fees. There's a use case out there for everybody in this space. And we don't have to get caught up in all the sort of hype for individual projects because there's a pot for every lid. Something that interests you might not interest me. Something that makes me feel giddy might not interest you. All that matters is that we can install software and interact over the internet and do some really cool things with value just because some programmers and marketers and people got together and decided we're going to make this happen. That makes me excited because at the end of the day, it's just like, I don't know, I feel like crypto the same way I feel about Linux and Windows and LibreOffice and Audacity and all the software I use day to day. Like, it's a tool. It's a really empowering and interesting tool, but I don't have to get too caught up in the hype or the negative. So I'm just going to use it for what it is.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, at its core principle, it doesn't matter what's happening in the world. Every 10 minutes, a new block is minted on the Bitcoin blockchain. And as long as we have internet and electricity, that will continue to be the case. Josh, this was an awesome overview for security practices. I think it was phenomenal to have you on because I, like many others, have been in the space for a while, but need reminders to check my security hygiene. And so I'll definitely be walking away with some good pointers and tips to implement into my own practices. Before we let you go, who do you want to speak with and what's the best way they can get in contact with you? And also maybe where we can go to get some Chain Toots content as well.
Yeah, so I'm genuinely here for everybody. I love to learn. I love to teach. If you're a brand new person, you don't know how to get started, you're an expert, you need some help with your security hygiene, I have a contact form on my website, chaintoots.com. I'm on some socials like LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook. Generally pretty responsive because I'm not really that big. I'm at the perfect size for a channel. I'd love it to grow. So you can find me on YouTube, Chaintoots, on GitHub, chaintoots.com. And if I may throw out digital sovereignty, protecting your crypto assets against common threats. It's widely available, Amazon, Barnes & Noble online. And of course, I'd appreciate if you bought a paperback or an ebook to help support. But to me, open knowledge sharing is the most important thing. You can read the individual chapters for free on GitHub, the whole book. You don't have to pay, you can share it. The audiobook is going to be the same deal when it comes out, and same with all the YouTube videos, articles, code demos. You can find me online. I genuinely hope you enjoy it. Send me a comment and let me know if you have questions.
I think there's an open space on my bookshelf for a new book.
Sick. I would love that.
Awesome. Well, Josh, thank you so much for taking the time to come on and talk about something you love. I hope that somebody listening to this in the future is able to benefit from a little tidbit that they learned today. The number one thing that I'm walking away with is that we're not infallible and we need to continue to keep our teeth sharp if we want to stay and make it long-term in this crazy space that we call crypto and blockchain. So thank you so much, Josh. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's always incredibly fun to have a conversation like this. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. And shout out to the C4 team for connecting us. Much obliged. Cheers, everyone. Well, thank you for tuning in to the Smart Economy podcast. To stay in the loop with all of our latest episodes and insights, head over to www.smarteconomypodcast.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for all of our video content. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please show your support by liking, commenting, and reviewing this episode on your favorite podcasting platform. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and bring even better content your way. We'd also love to hear from you. Please drop a comment on Spotify or YouTube to share what topics you'd like us to cover or who you'd like to see as our next guest. And if you or someone you know would make a great guest, please reach out. We're always looking for fresh voices and new perspectives. And for our NEO token holders out there, please consider voting for NEO News today as your council representative. We've proudly been serving the NEO ecosystem since 2017, and we'll continue to do so by putting portions of our council rewards directly back into ecosystem growth initiatives. Once again, thank you so much for listening, and we look forward to catching you next time.